Davey. We're very fortunate to have him on with us today. And he's been using FIT for about a year in his performance practice and has some really cool things that he'd like to show us and teach us all regarding FIT and conditioning. So let me introduce Kyle, just a few sentences about him. He's located in Salem, Oregon, where he owns Salem Speed Academy and Personal Training. There he provides training for athletes and adults alike, as well as performance training, remote strength and conditioning for sports teams and other organizations. He does consulting and writes as well. And Kyle has special interests in speed development, injury prevention, and performance analysis. So Kyle did a webinar for us about a year ago, and that's where I got to know him a little bit and got to know kind of what's going on with him professionally and also with his young family, and sort of learned that he's the busiest guy that I know and does it really well. So Kyle, we really appreciate you carving out some time for all of us. And I'll turn it over to you. What we'll do is have a presentation with Kyle and let him get through his slides. And then we'll also look forward to some Q&A where we get to kind of ask him and hear his expertise. So Kyle, it's all yours, sir.
I appreciate that, Landon. Thank you. I do feel busy. I appreciate you saying that I do it well. Sometimes I feel like I do it well. Sometimes I feel like I do busy, not so well. But we survive day by day and make it work. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned I did do a webinar for you guys about a year ago. That was on concussion prevention via neck training. So if you guys have interest in that, I encourage you to go dig that one up and check that one out. This one I'm really excited about, individualizing conditioning with the click. Via the 3015 IFT and FIT. So FIT, through their algorithms and their logic, you can leverage it to custom build conditioning and push it to whole teams or whole groups of athletes at once based on the 3015 IFT. Conditioning is kind of, we all know it's important, but it kind of feels like the dark horse, and some of us do it really well. Some of us like to not think about it at all. But we all know that it's important. So FIT has been really convenient and really, really easy for me to automate this and to be able to push this out both to private clients in the private side, and then with the teams and the groups that I've worked with to be able to supply it to them as well. Very fast and very easy. So I'm excited to share this with you guys. All right, so here's what this is not. This presentation is not going to be a physiology lecture. I'm not going to bore you with aerobic enzymes and eccentric cardiac hypertrophy and all that stuff. We're not going to do a huge overview of conditioning methods, and it's not going to be like 50 minutes of textbook followed by 5 minutes of stuff and then a few minutes of Q&A. What we are going to do, I'm going to spend 20 minutes at most chatting with you guys. We'll open it up for a Q&A after that, and that's going to be this webinar. Pretty simple. While I'm speaking, I'll provide a brief intro to the 3015 IFT. Many of us probably are already familiar with it, maybe already using it. And we'll just do a brief walkthrough for how to leverage FIT, what that actually looks like, the nuts and bolts. So if you are a FIT user, if you become a FIT user, you can scroll back to this and this will be like a walkthrough for how to build the progression, which is going to be good. So quickly about the 3015 IFT, it was created by Martin Buchheit in the year 2000. It gives you an objective conditioning score, and that's key. It gives you an objective score. It is not a pass fail or this fluffy, you did better than last time. Although you can track if you've made progress and done better than last time, but it gives you a score, which is key. That's what we need to be able to condition from. And there's published benchmarks. So Martin and his team and others have just published a lot of data regarding different athletes and their scores. So you can pull data from academy level female soccer players in London and see what their 3015 scores were versus a professional males team in like Finland, for instance, and you can see where they scored. And that's nice because then you can rank yourself and your athletes objectively against others who are at different levels. So it gives you a benchmark to understand kind of where you're at, if you're fit or if you're not fit, and if it's a strength or a weakness, so on and so forth. The technical side, it's really, really easy to implement. It's super easy to execute, to set up. Whole teams can do it at once, which is so nice, and it takes only like 15 to 25 minutes. So 25 minutes if you're really, really fit, and 15 minutes if you're on the other end of the spectrum there. So how does it work? It was originally developed to be done on a soccer pitch, which we'll see right over here. So if you're doing it this way, which is I think how most people probably do it, it's 40 meters in length, and you're basically running intervals back and forth. And 40 meters happens to be the length of the penalty box. I know that was not an accidental design by Martin, so it's real clever. We can just set it up in a penalty box. But they've also adapted it to be done on a basketball court, which I've done myself a handful of times. You can do it in a straight line on a track, and then they've also have adapted versions to be done for ice hockey, which is pretty slick. So what does the test actually look like? Here it is. Easy just to kind of walk and talk through it. So this is obviously done on a soccer pitch. So this must be 40 meters in length. So there's 3 lines. There's the start line here. There's the end line there. And then there's a midline, obviously, right in the center there. And the athletes are running back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now there's always a 30-second period of running followed by a 15-second period of rest. So it's 30 seconds running, 15 seconds rest, 30 seconds of running, 15 seconds of rest. Hence the 30-15 IFT, which stands for intermittent fitness test. So it's 30-15 intermittent fitness test, or the 30-15 IFT. Now there's a soundtrack that goes along with it, which is really convenient. You can just download it. It's free from Martin's website. And the soundtrack keeps you on pace. So the way it works is even though you're always running for 30-second intervals, the speed at which you run is going to increase at every stage. The test is done in kilometers per hour. So it starts off at 12 kilometers per hour, which is painstakingly slow. It's basically like a power walk. So you have to start really, really slow. And then each stage increases in half kilometer per hour increments from there. So stage 1 is 12 kilometers per hour, stage 2 is 12 and a half, and 13 and 13 and a half, so on and so forth. Now, as I mentioned, the soundtrack keeps you on track. And the way that works is it beeps. And every time you hear a beep, you should be at one of the lines. So watching these guys, as they approach that line, they should hear a beep. And then as they're running here, as they approach the midline, you should hear beep. Now that beep indicates the time, which if you're exactly on pace, the beep happens right when you hit that line. So if you can imagine this, you're running down the field, your foot touches the line, beep, great, I'm on track. I'm running down the field, my foot touches the line, beep, great, I'm on track. I turn around, I start coming back. Now I hear the beep before I've gotten to that line. That means I'm a little bit behind. So I need to pick my pace up. Or likewise, if you touch that line before you hear that beep, so I touch the line, I take a few steps, beep, now I know I'm ahead. So you can use this to kind of pace yourself. Now, the test terminates when you can no longer keep up. I think most people do when you miss 2 stages in a row. Some people do 3. I personally do 2. So when you miss the line twice in a row, that's when the test ends. And there's zones here. Won't go into all the technical details of how to execute the test, but basically there's zones here, and you have to be in the zone. If you're not in the zone, when you hear the beep, that counts as a miss. So essentially, when you can no longer keep up, which is the spirit of the test, when you can no longer keep up, that's when the test ends. So I personally like this one because it's kind of a gut check. You kind of get to see which athletes have shown up for that day and who are really ready to push themselves and who are really ready to work. Because you literally just go until you can't. There is no passing and no failing. You just go until you can't keep up. So it's really a lot of fun to watch athletes push themselves. There's a sense of camaraderie that comes around because if you fail, you step off to the side. So literally people are walking off to the side, walking off to the side, walking off to the side. And eventually there's only a small group of people left. And then you get the rest of the team cheering them on, keep going, keep going, keep going. And it creates a really fun environment. But that's the 30-15 IFT in a nutshell. Now, as far as your score goes, the score is the last stage that you've completed. So let's say you're at 17.5 kilometers per hour. You complete that stage, you've made all the checkpoints. You're at 18 kilometers per hour. You complete that stage, you've made all the checkpoints. You get to 18.5 kilometers per hour and you fail. You cannot keep up. So then your score would be 18 because that's the last stage that you were able to complete. Now the outputs, what does this give us? Obviously it gives you a score. The score is referred to in the literature as VIFT, or the velocity, kind of terminal velocity. VIFT is just the acronym for the score there. It's in kilometers per hour, which is, for us as Americans, we don't use that metric, but it's just handy. So the score, your VIFT in general is going to be slightly above your maximum aerobic speed. So again, your VIFT is slightly above maximal aerobic speed. So it slightly overestimates MAS. Now you can use it to also estimate VO2 max. Martin has put out a spreadsheet, which is nice, so in conjunction with body mass and your VIFT score. you can kind of estimate VO2 max, which is kind of handy if, if you want to be able to track that metric. But really for me, I think of the VIFT, it's kind of like an aerobic 1RM. Again, I know it's slightly above your MAS, but I just think of it as an aerobic 1RM in the sense that it's programmable. So kind of old school thoughts, but just like you could take a 1RM on a bench press or a squat, and you can build a program based on that. 3 sets of 5 at 85%, 3x3 at 87.5 or whatever. The 3015 provides like a aerobic 1RM, so we can use it to build programs, which is the whole, to me, the most value that it provides. And you can use it to check progress as well. If you retest as your score higher, but most of the progress for me, or most of the value in it, is for being able to individualize and customize the individual, customize the conditioning programs to each individual. So that way, instead of saying, hey, everybody's running 110s and you all better do it in 17 seconds or whatever the metric is, the standard, that would crush some people or be impossible, but for others, it's just a warm-up. So that style of conditioning doesn't make a lot of sense from a physiologic and from a scientific perspective. So the 3015 and its score helps us solve some of those problems. So here's a program that I've built that I've implemented successfully with athletes. Honestly, many of my athletes, due to time constraints, if I'm working like privately in the private sector, athletes hire me, a lot of them have time constraints or just don't want to do the conditioning twice per week. So in that case, oftentimes I'll just do day one. But when I've worked with the teams in the past, we've done 2 days. Obviously, if you're conditioning 2 days per week, you're going to get better results than if you're only conditioning 1 day per week. So these intervals at these specific speeds are recommended by Martin Buchheit and his team, and then I just build a program off of that. So what are we looking at here? Okay, so day one, we have a 15-second run followed by a 15-second rest period, and this 95% VIFT is that's actually the distance that you have to hit. So big picture, let's think about this in, say, miles per hour. If I know that you're going 60 miles per hour on the freeway, cruise control, and I ask, hey, how far are you going to cover in 15 minutes? Then you can very easily ascertain you're going to cover 15 miles over 15 minutes because you're moving 60 miles per hour, which is 1 mile per minute. So what I'm getting at is if you have time and you have speed, you can use those two variables to deduce the distance covered. And that's exactly what we're doing here. It might sound a little complicated. Perhaps there's a more simple way for me to explain it. But as you see it moving forward through the rest of this presentation, it's going to make a lot of sense. So basically what we're saying is, hey, you're going to cover this distance, 95% over 15 seconds. I apologize. I've got some items on my screen, so I apologize if they're covering it for you guys. I'm not sure if they are or not, but I'll just kind of move them out of the way for myself just in case they appear on your screen too. So we're saying you're running for 15 seconds, taking a 15-second rest, and this is the custom distance that every athlete is going to hit. So back to meathead terms, this would be like saying you're doing 15 reps at, well, we wouldn't use 95% 1RM obviously for 15 reps, but that's kind of what we're doing. We're saying this is how much you're doing, and this is the intensity at which you're doing it. So this is like volume, this is the intensity. Now to build that out into the program, just my bias is to build volume before intensity in terms of conditioning. So it starts really, really easy, really simple. Week 1 is 2 sets of 3 for day 1. Week 2, 3x3, week 3, 3x4. And then you can see that it just builds in volume. Week 7 and week 8 are both the same intentionally. That's really, the first 2 weeks are like not that difficult, but when you get to week like 4, it starts getting kind of real. And then weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8 are like buckle up. It's gonna get you. So week 7 and 8 is 3x8 intentionally. And I've done some trial with different rep schemes and such. And this is just what I found works best in my experience. So, but then on day 2, hey, same concept, 30-second runs, 30-second intervals. Now the speed is a little bit slower. So the distance is, well, the total distance is going to be greater, but your speed is going to be a little bit slower by virtue of running, twice as long, right, in terms of time. So, but same idea here. It's just really simple linear progression. You're just building volume over time. So we can sort of think of this like intrinsic tempos kind of. It's like, it's pretty easy, like tempo work. You're moving, and you can do it either changing direction, like running 40 meters and turning around and coming back, or you can just do it in a straight line. Now, in terms of how we set that up in FIT, there we go. In terms of how we set this up in FIT, this is actually a screenshot of the app. So this is what the athlete would see. So you would build what FIT calls a KPI. We all know what KPIs are. You can build those into FIT, and FIT will help track them for you, which is really, really nice. And you can use those KPIs, those metrics in your programming to customize what you're saying. So back to the meathead terms, if bench press 1RM is one of your KPIs, you can put in FIT 3 sets of 10 at 70% of your 1RM. Now, all your athletes are going to have different 1RMs, but when they open the app, it's always going to show, for them, it'll show whatever number is 70% of their 1RM. So they don't open it up and it says 70%. They show the actual load, but it's calculated based on what you put in the back end. So, if an athlete's 1RM is 200 and it says, the workout is 70%, then when they open it up, it's going to show 140 pounds because that's 20% of 200. So it just makes things really, really simple. So on the athlete's end, you would input this KPI test here, and they would input their score. So this athlete scored 18. You would hit record set as complete. And now this is going to be automatically uploaded into FYTT's database. And it looks just like this on the back end. So this is actually, when you're on the back end as the coach, this is a screenshot of that. It's exactly what it looks like. So we can see all these athletes score. So Grace here scored 18, Talia scored 16 and a half, Emma scored 16, so on and so forth. So how do we take this and actually make it the programming for the athletes to see athlete facing? Well, first, what we would do, there's lots of different ways you can work FYTT's logic. The way that I've done it, I've taken this score and then I've converted it to distance covered over 15 seconds at 100% of their VIFT. So in other words, I'm saying if this athlete's VIFT was 18 kilometers per hour, if you run at 18 kilometers per hour for 15 seconds, you're going to cover 82 yards. So that's what this whole KPI is. I'm just saying 16 and a half kilometers for 15 seconds covers 75 yards. 16 kilometers for 15 seconds covers 74 yards, so on and so forth. How did I set that up? This is the one part of manual data entry that we as coaches have to do. It does not take long at all. So I just created a spreadsheet. Here's a 30-15 IFT score. These are the yards covered over 15 seconds at 100% VIFT. And to save you time, here's the formulas to do that. So what you would do is take whatever their score is, multiply it by 4.557, and that gives you the total yards covered at that speed over 15 seconds, if that makes sense. So in other words, just to be clear, I'm running at 16 kilometers per hour. I multiply 16 by 4.557, and that gives me 72.91, which tells me that if I'm moving at 16 kilometers per hour, I'm covering exactly 72.91 yards over 15 seconds. And this is important because we're going to use this metric to program. And then obviously here in the spreadsheet, I have 95% and 90%. So just multiply this figure by 0.95 to get that, multiply this by 0.9 to get that figure. So now I have all the data that I need. And I just go back and I just plug it in right here. You literally just plug it in, off you go. Now this is the actual program builder on the back end. So again, as a coach, I log in, this is exactly what I see. So this is week 1, week 2, week 3, and then that's all I had room for in the screenshot, right? But you scroll down, this is an 8-week program. This is the same program that I showed a few slides ago, same demo program. So this is just day 1. Basically, FYTT works almost exclusively, or not exclusively, but almost identically to Excel, which is really, really nice. It's just got a few more features that make it easy for us. So essentially what we're saying here is, hey, you're running for 15 seconds. Your distance is going to be 95% of your 30-15 score. You're doing 3 reps of that, and then you're resting for 3 minutes. So I just explained to the athletes, it says right here, 15-15. I just explained, make sure they understand it's a 15-second run followed by a 15-second rest. And I talk them through this so they understand the conditioning. But this is how you build it. And again, the nice thing is when the athletes themselves log in, they don't see 95% right here. That's just what I've programmed. What they see is their actual distance. So this is an actual screenshot of the app, athlete facing. So if I'm an athlete, I log into my app, this is exactly what I would see. So even though on the back end, as the coach, I've programmed 95%, as an athlete, I open it up and it tells me, hey, I have to cover 77.9 yards, which is 95% of my 30-15 score, but FYTT does that math here for me. So now if I have 100 athletes on my team and I assign them all this program, every athlete is going to have a different custom number here based on whatever their 30-15 IFT score is that they've inputted themselves, right? Based on the uploads, or I could input it myself. But the key here is all I have to do is write this program once, and then I assign it to every single athlete that I want to have it done. And as long as they have those scores on the back end of FYTT, then they're all going to have their custom formula pop up right here for them. So it's beautiful. And this is how simple FYTT makes it. The rest of this beauty is this progression here. I have it saved, and I can just plug this into any program that I want at any time. So no matter which athlete I'm working with, whether it's a team, whether it's an individual athlete on the private side, I can plop this conditioning protocol into their program at any point of their program, and they'll have access to see it here on the app, which is just beautiful. This is how I used to do it. I would give this to the team sport coach, or I would keep this myself if I was working with the team. So now I would say, hey, all of these athletes, I would calculate it. They were running down and back. It was a change of direction, right? So they were running actually across a penalty box. So this would say, hey, all these athletes, they have to run across the penalty box, touch the line, and then turn around and run 17 meters back. The rest of the athletes, this one has 20 meters. This one has to go down and back 22 meters. Walk and drop cones. And the spreadsheet is still handy if you want to give it to a coach or just keep it for yourself or whatever. But this is the old way that I used to have to do it. Now I just use FYTT. Now I just use this. I push it out to the athletes. They know exactly what distances they need to hit. For the training itself, it's really nice because you can just put them in groups and say, hey, you 6, you all have to get to that cone. You 6 have to get to that cone. And based on their individual scores, their own fitness levels, they're all going to have different distances to hit over that same 15-second interval. So it's really nice. It's really beautiful. FYTT makes this process really easy and really simple, really streamlined. And it's just saved me a ton of time. And so I hope that it will benefit you guys as well. So, hey, if you guys have any questions about anything, whether it's FYTT, the back end, the presentation, or otherwise, I'd be happy to field those questions now.
Yeah, that's perfect, Kyle. That was really interesting. Thank you for doing that. And then, yeah, we definitely want to get folks asking some questions. So I'm going to stop the share right now just so I can see everyone. And then you guys can unmute yourselves and shoot a question off, or you can type it in the chat. And while we're waiting for that, Kyle, I was just wondering if you had some anecdotes of the progression as you've run athletes through this. What kind of progression do you see in terms of improved conditioning?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that part. So on the slide, it was, week 0 was a test, and then there was the 8-week program, and then week 9 said retest. And I typically, it does kind of depend. The athletes have to show up and they have to push themselves, right? And so sometimes they're slacking, or sometimes they're just don't want to work that day. But for the ones who do work, I tend to see at least 1 stage improvement, if not 1 whole kilometer per hour improvement. And just like anything else, there is a bit of a learning curve. So an athlete's first time doing it, it might take once or twice to get a valid number. But we do definitely see progression. And then the beautiful thing about this too is after they retest, all I do is update their KPIs, update their numbers in FYTT. Then I just reissue the same exact protocol, the same 8-week protocol back to them. They're familiar with it. They know what they're doing. They start back at the 2 sets of 3, but now their distances to cover is greater than it was before because their score has increased. So if, say they had to cover 72 yards over the 15-second interval, they go through an 8-week progression of that, retest, their score's higher. Now they're covering 81 yards or even 76 yards over that same interval. And we just go back through the program.
Do you prescribe this to, is this something you run all of your athletes through, or is it just specific ones? what are the factors in deciding when to prescribe this?
On the private side, some of the factors include availability. If a kid or an athlete only has a couple of days a week to train, then I have to prioritize if conditioning is going to go there, right? But ideally, I would love to put all athletes on this twice a week. Usually Tuesday, Friday split is what I've done on this program, and kind of build the rest of the programming around that. I'm a believer that conditioning is valuable and important. It all is, right? Speed and power and conditioning and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, I have a question. My name's Andrew Reynolds. I'm a private coach out of Columbus, Ohio. Landon brings up a good question. Well, I got Carolina on. I'm working the UNC basketball camp right now. But Landon brings up a good question of is this specific to one athlete population, or is this across the board? Anyone who comes into your facility, this is a program that you run them through.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of coaches are changing their opinion, or maybe it's a new sort of type of thought that my belief, my perspective is that our job as strength coaches is to develop physiologic qualities. So I want to make athletes faster. I want to improve force output. I want to improve power, and I want to improve fitness. And I'm not of the belief that everything we do has to be super sport specific. I do think there's value in doing things that are sport specific. I just know I'm not a position coach, and I don't attempt to be a position coach. My job is to develop physical qualities. They then let the sports coaches turn those qualities into sports performance. A lot of other people would disagree with me and say that our job is to make on the field performance better, and that's fine. I hear you. I respect your opinion. That is the goal at the end of the day. I'm not saying it's not the goal to make athletes better. But I'm not teaching a wide receiver how to run routes. I might teach him how to get off quick and how to slow down and change direction, but I'm not teaching them how to run routes. That's the sport coach job. So that's my preamble to say, I will give this protocol to any athlete who requires repeat sprint ability and who requires aerobic fitness. So soccer players, skill position football players. I've fallen into ultimate frisbee. I train a lot of ultimate frisbee professional athletes, and that sport's actually it's really an incredible sport. Some of the best athletes I've ever trained have been ultimate athletes, lacrosse athletes. Track and field is different. That is sport specific in and of itself. But any like field or court sport athletes, basketball, soccer players, lacrosse, to me, this program improves their aerobic fitness. It's going to yield improvements in VO2 max, and that's going to have positive benefits. So that's my long spiel to say, yes, for the most part, every athlete is going to get a program like this in the same way that they're all going to deadlift and jump, because those are going to improve qualities that help, lead to better performance, right?
Awesome. Love it. Thank you.
All right, what else we got?
One question, Kyle, is what are some strategies that you use when you're prescribing the 30-15 to remote athletes? Are there any strategies you have in terms of making sure that athletes are engaged remotely?
For the conditioning protocol itself, or the 30-15 test?
Any of your, I would love to know kind of your approach to remote training and just how to keep them in general engaged.
Well, part of it, the fit is nice, because when you log into the roster, as you know, Landon, it'll show you the last time that each athlete has opened the app and logged in. So I can quickly go back and see, hey, this person logged in yesterday, or this person hasn't logged in 6 days, but they were supposed to do a workout 2 days ago. What's going on? So I can reach out to them that way. Luckily, a lot of people that I work with, they seek me out, and so they're self-motivated. And usually I don't have to be a motivator and talk them into doing their workouts, which is really, really nice. But when I do notice that people have not been on the app and they've not been working out, I'll give them a call, shoot them a text, hey, what's going on? Everything all right? You doing okay? And then I just reiterate their own goals back to them. Hey, you told me that you wanted this, this, and this. Is that still the case? Also, you do want to get in better shape. You do want to maximize your performance. You do want to be the dude on your team. Are you working to get there, or have you taken 6 days off? Like, let's make sure that your actions are in alignment with your goals and what you want to achieve. So I guess a little bit of psychology or whatever that is there, but those are the strategies that I kind of rely on first.
I love that. I love that. And please go ahead and unmute yourself as you have any questions. I also am curious, as we have some other questions coming in, Kyle, what's on your radar in terms of future trends in S&C? What are some of the things that you're seeing and learning about as cutting edge?
I think the neck is going to come into play. I did the webinar for you guys last year. It seems like more people are training the neck now and recognizing the value and concussion prevention and brain health there. I think the foot is going to be a lot more valuable. People are going to start studying and evaluating foot mechanics, foot strength. I think I think Davey Marin and his team just published a paper on foot strength and late acceleration, or early acceleration, but late stance propulsion performance. So I think we're going to see a lot more there. I think the computer vision field is going to continue to grow. Coaches are going to be able to analyze kinematics a lot more quickly and a lot more easily. I know View Motion is doing some stuff, and I'm old school. I still do everything for better or for worse, kind of by hand. I take the video and analyze it myself there. But I think those trends are going to continue to grow. I think different types of motion capture are going to continue to grow to analyze kinematics. But as a result of that, I also think what's inevitably is going to happen is people are going to lose a little bit of the, I don't want to say critical thinking, but if you have a system like an AI system that's analyzing kinematics for you and spitting all this data out, if you're unable to understand and analyze that data and internalize what it means and why that data is present, then it doesn't always yield next steps, if that makes sense. And so having it all easy there for you also takes away kind of some of the art, I guess, and some of the mastery behind, well, I see the hip flexion value during acceleration is not what I want, but why is that? And how do I tackle that? And so some of those soft skills, I fear are going to get lost in place of some of this automation. But those are the trends that I think are coming.
I love it. Yeah, thank you. I know you do a lot of research and a lot of writing, so it's nice to kind of check with you and see what's on your radar. Are there any sub-maximal tests that you would recommend starting someone on if they're not ready for a 30-15?
The 30-15 is sub-maximal. I mean, it's a maximal aerobic test. But it is sub-max, and everybody can, anybody who's not healthy, right? Anybody who is healthy rather can do this test. And as I mentioned, it starts at 12 kilometers per hour. I think it actually starts at 10, but there's an option to start at 12, which is great. And that's like you could power walk that pace. It's like a trot. It is painstakingly, unbelievably slow to start a test at that speed. And so you're basically going from like a power walk to a fast jog. Nowhere do you even get near a sprint. You're running fast by the end relative to your own fitness levels, but it is sub-max. So I think any athlete who can run, who's healthy, can do this test. And it might take once or twice, just like any test. It'll take once or twice for you to kind of get your bearings and understand what it is and how to do it. What I do when I run athletes through it is I run it with them. So I'll start, because they always take off too fast, because like I said, 12 kilometers per hour is incredibly slow. And so I just pace them. I just go. And then I usually tell myself, hey, I'm going to stop at 14, but then I just keep going until I personally fail also. So you just keep running it. And yeah, but I think anybody can do the test, because it starts so easy and just gets harder, and you just pull yourself out, when you're ready.
Are there any other similar tests like this that you could apply for someone using a stationary bike?
I suppose you could recreate it. You could track watts, or you could track speed on a stationary bike. You would just have to do all of the computations and do all that yourself. So I'm not familiar with a set protocol that exists outside of running, but there's no reason why you couldn't recreate it and set speeds on a bike and do the 30, 15-second intervals and so on and so forth. But you just have to recreate the wheel of it.
And then Michael, thank you for the question. How often do you test or retest athletes?
So I'll only test at the beginning of the conditioning period, because there's no point, like if I'm not going to use the data, there's no point in putting an athlete through it, right? So if I know that I'm not going to program the conditioning for them, then I'm not going to run the test on. But if I know, hey, we're going to start conditioning next week, then I have to run the test, because I can't program for them if I don't have that number. So I'll always run the 30-15, early, and then start the 8-week conditioning protocol after that. And then ideally, perfect world, I would love to retest in week 9 just to capture their improvements. And then if you move on to another conditioning cycle or another 8-week cycle after that, or create your own custom cycles. There's no reason why it has to be 8 weeks, and no reason why it has to be the program that I've laid out. Works for me, but you guys, take creative freedom with that. So yeah, so just at the beginning, at the end of the conditioning period, whenever that is, if you're working with a team sport athlete, obviously doing it in the beginning of the off season would be helpful. You could run it at the beginning of the preseason if you wanted to get like a post data point to check where guys are. But yeah, those are the timelines that I'd recommend.
And Sumer, I wanted to make sure that I'm addressing your question and make sure that we got everything covered there. So let me run this question by you, Kyle. Can you recommend any submaximal test correlated with 3015 IFT test data? So Sumer, I just want to make sure that you got all of your questions answered.
I'm unfamiliar with any other tests that are correlated with the 3015 IFT. The only thing I could think would be, because you can use the 3015 score to extrapolate a pretty close estimate on VO2 max. If you had a VO2 max, I wonder if you can use that to extrapolate a 3015 score. But no, I'm not familiar. There's other tests that are similar in style where you're running intervals like the yo-yo test or the beep test or whatever. They even use beeps, but I'm unfamiliar with how those scores correlate to a 3015 score and how you would program based off of them.
Got it. Well, that's got all of our questions answered that were coming in the chat. So I just want to make sure, Kyle, is there a good way for folks to get in touch with you if they have additional questions?
Yeah, I'm on social media. You guys can find me on Twitter. I probably should have put my handles up. I think it's just Kyle Davey 209 maybe on Twitter. My email address is kyledavey209@gmail.com or Kyle@Salem Speed Academy. Both of those will route to me. So if you guys have questions, feel free to reach out my way, and I'd be happy to chat.
That's great. That's great. We really appreciate your time, Kyle. Thank you so much for this. And just so everyone knows, we will be emailing a link to the recording as in the next day or two, so you can have access to it. Kyle, thanks again. We really appreciate this.
Appreciate you, Landon. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all.
All right, take care, guys.